Welcome to the Skills World Live radio show, sponsored by OneFile, a world where everyone is learning for their future. Stay tuned for all the news, views and interviews in association with FE News.
Hello, I'm Tom Bewick. Welcome to Skills World Live. And in a week when the former Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer fired off an Exocet missile saying that hardly anyone tells the truth in government these days, it wasn't much better for the leader of the opposition either. Trying to get a pint in the Georgian city of Bath, Keir Starmer was told in no uncertain terms just how unwelcome he was by the pub's landlord. Meanwhile, we discovered the ill-fated dreams of a few capitalist owners of Europe's top football clubs this week. Instead of open competition with the skills of the many shining through, the oligarchs wanted to stitch up a cosy new league where failure and relegation was never an option. Still, at least we finally heard from the great leader this week as Gavin Williamson, launching his Flexi Apprenticeships proposal, shocked us all with yet more of his unknown talents. Yep, telling LBC's Nick Ferrari about his penchant for being able to, wait for it, milk a cow. That little bovine revelation from the Secretary of State for Education reminded me of an earlier confession he made during the lockdown. The animal lover and one-time tarantula owner told children in his constituency just how much adopting a puppy had really boosted his spirits. No doubt, I'm sure, under the relentless pressure of one policy U-turn after another.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
On the show today, we're partly picking up the baton from the last episode where we looked at this summer's cancelled examinations arrangements. In the hot seat this week after the news, I'll be talking to the man who, as interim Chief Regulator at the exams watchdog Ofqual, is tasked with avoiding yet another results week in August that turns into a fiasco. Don't go away though, folks, because we've got some really interesting guests in the two chat segments of our edition this week. Yep, we're talking all things digital skills with the likes of WorldSkills UK and the Learning and Work Institute, and asking whether the country is facing an impending digital and IT skills disaster. We've also got some top tunes coming up from the likes of Freeze, Laura Branigan and Dead or Alive. But first, get your analogue ears around this banger from the digital sound vaults of my dance music favourites. It's Above and Beyond, and I Saw Good.
Peridot Partners works across the UK education and skills sector to transform leadership and inspire societal change. We do this through executive search, recruitment, and board development services. If your organisation requires support to appoint great leaders through a thorough and national search campaign, or perhaps your board has a skills gap which needs filling, contact Peridot for an informal discussion about how we can help you. We love what we do, and we do it with passion. So search online for Peridot Partners or email education@peridotpartners.co.uk.
Are you wrestling with managing cost and resources whilst delivering a high-quality endpoint assessment experience? Does your current IT solution meet new regulatory arrangements and ways of working? Worried about data security? Need to gain Ofqual recognition? Creatio's helped more companies through the recognition process than anyone else. And because it underpins all aspects of a qualifications lifecycle, more regulated organisations use Creatio's system than any other. Contact Creatio. See how we can help.
Time now to find out what's been making the news headlines in your skills world this week. The Department for Education in England is seeking views on its new Flexi Apprenticeships proposal. The consultation follows the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's announcement in March of a £7 million fund for the new scheme aimed at supporting sectors with non-traditional business models like those in the creative industries. The idea is that sector-based agencies will operate as the employer of the apprentices, allowing the apprentices in turn to be placed with multiple firms on project-based assignments. The consultation closes on the 1st of June. In other news, Ofqual launched its guidance on this summer's appeals process for GCSEs, A-levels and certain vocational qualifications. The temporary regulatory framework was consulted on earlier this year by the exams watchdog, but the new guidance is aimed at helping awarding organisations comply with the regulator's requirements that they can inform schools and colleges through their own guidance as to how the appeals process will work. Respondents have until the 5th of May to reply to the consultation. And finally, a report out from the Social Market Foundation this week has found that over a third of graduates now regret going to university, preferring a vocational pathway instead. The report, funded by the Further Education Trust for Leadership, also revealed that 48% of people said they would prefer their child to obtain a vocational qualification over a degree. However, the survey also found a sharp age divide, with the majority of 18 to 24-year-olds still preferring the graduate route.
Contact us at Skills World Live. We want to hear from you. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter at Skills World Live, at Tom Bewick. Use the hashtag Skills World Live. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
Welcome back to Skills World Live. Time now for this week's special guest interview. Listeners of last week's show will know that we debated whether this summer's cancelled exams will be a week of glory for teachers and students, or a repeat of the chaotic scenes we saw last summer. The general consensus, it seems, was that the planning of this year's revised arrangements for GCSEs, A-levels and a whole array of vocational technical qualifications do appear to be better thought through. Indeed, with what the Prime Minister called last year the mutant algorithm now no longer a feature in moderating and awarding grades, it is left to a new system of teacher-assessed grades, or tags in the jargon, to be used instead. Critics, however, point out that this isn't exactly a fairer system either, and cite the massive grade inflation that appeared last year being carried forward again this summer. The person appointed to oversee the qualifications and exam system in England is the Chief Regulator at the Office of Qualifications and Examinations Regulation, or just Ofqual to you and me. Commencing in post as Interim Chief Regulator in January of this year, the former awarding body Chief Exec, Simon Lebus, now joins us for his first Skills World Live interview. Welcome, Simon, to the show.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
Now, let's start, if I may, with this sort of central point about the fairness of these extraordinary arrangements. I mean, how is what's planned this year fairer than what happened last summer when these exams had to be cancelled?
I think a massive difference, and it's been central to the design of this year's arrangements and the thinking about them, is that they are intended to give students a real sense of agency. So whereas last year the assessed grades were based on teachers' estimate of what students would have got if they'd sat the exams and they were subject to moderation by an algorithm, this year it will be based purely on teacher judgments about how well the students have done and how much what progress they've made in relation to what they've already been taught. So they won't be examined on what they haven't been taught. They'll only be examined on what they have been taught. And teacher assessment will be the way in which their capability in that is assessed. So I think it's a much fairer way than the arrangements last year. It gives students that absolutely critical sense of agency that was missing last year and which was so instrumental in.
Yeah. As you say, I mean, it might sound like a nuance, this idea of you're only assessing on what students could have practically be expected to know as opposed to what they should know if we hadn't had the lockdowns and therefore, arguably the lost learning. But of course, that is probably a really important principle, isn't it, from last year. But what do you say to those parents and students that have, certainly emailed this programme to ask why, if the exams were cancelled by the Secretary of State in January, does it feel that in some schools exams, 2-hour papers under examination conditions are still sort of going ahead? I mean, have the exams been cancelled or different type of exams and assessments? What's Ofqual's position on that?
The arrangements allow teachers to use a variety of different ways of arriving at their judgments. So that could be coursework, it could be homework, it could be in-class assessments, it could be the externally set tasks that the exam boards are providing and which were put on up on the website on Monday, or it could be a series of as it were, controlled exams that resemble closely what students might have been facing if normal exams had gone ahead. So it's really very much at the discretion of teachers to determine what they think is going to be best. Teachers have the objective, remember, of making sure that they can recover as much lost learning time as possible. So in a sense, having a series of small exams right at the end of the assessment window may serve them better for that purpose, but other teachers may take a different view. So the arrangements really are designed to allow teachers the maximum amount of discretion. And I've seen coverage that some schools are going to do their own mini exam series, other schools are going to approach it differently. And I think it's very much down to what individual teachers and schools think is appropriate. There are obviously other considerations as workload, there's manageability, and also making sure that students feel they're being fairly dealt with. So that sort of background to it.
But that word, of course, said discretion. To some, that would sound like that's about supporting the teaching profession, trusting their judgment. Each school taking into account its own circumstances. But potentially, is this? Could students or parents perceive this as, well, why in my particular school am I being assessed at GCSE, A level, or in a vocational qualification and applied general through what feels very much still like exams, but in another school, exactly the same subject, same age pupil, doing the same type of qualification, feel that actually their teachers have taken a completely different sort of approach to the assessment? I mean, it's back to that challenge we had last summer, isn't it, where potentially there's a perceived unfairness about how one part of the system is being treated compared to another. This is from the student's perspective, I guess.
Well, I guess we find ourselves in this situation because of the pandemic, and that's imposed different strains on different schools and different teachers and different students have had to deal with a variety of different circumstances. And I think in that situation, it wouldn't be wise to seek to impose a blanket uniform solution.
Yeah,
we have said that we want to rely on teacher judgment, and I think part of that reliance is about letting teachers decide what the best method of arriving at decisions is. I think one of the factors that's possibly driving schools' take-up of exams as a device is because they want to make sure that there is a transparency about how they arrive at their judgments, and also make sure they're defensible. It's absolutely clear what they're doing. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do. But I think also, as I say, the basic principle is that schools should be able to determine what the best way of arriving at the teacher assessed grades is, but do it in a way that doesn't drive out learning time. Yeah.
What role do you think then is there for the exam boards and the awarding organisations then in this process, both in terms of the general qualifications and the vocational technical? Because traditionally, of course, there would have been a major role for them in terms of setting the exam questions, them being independently marked, and those results being issued to students via these so-called centres. What's the role this summer then for exam boards, awarding organisations, in your view?
Well, the exam boards have had a huge amount to do because they are going to be responsible for administering the quality assurance arrangements, which will touch every single centre. There's quite a well-developed set of arrangements to ensure that the quality is there throughout and that the system is administered in a fair way. They've also produced a variety of materials that schools can use. They will also be providing training support. They'll also be providing helplines so that schools or students can ring to find out exactly what's happening. And then they'll have to be processing a huge amount of data once the teacher assessed grades come in, looking at them, making sure that they're consistent with the centre assessed, with the centre policies, making sure that the results are broadly where you would expect them to be, investigating any anomalies or incidents of malpractice or whistleblowing. And then making sure that all the results are available for the first time in a single week. We've got results being published all in a single week. So although they're not actually administering a normal exam series, there's a massive amount that they're going to be doing, and they will play a very key part in ensuring that arrangements for this summer go off well. Yeah.
And on the condensing of the results timetable this year, in the sense of it, as you say, it's all in 1 week as opposed to traditional fortnight. As a regulator, you don't perceive any challenges then around that particular point?
Well, yes, it's clearly going to be administratively quite burdensome, potentially complicated. It will require staff in centres quite probably to help students and give them advice about progression routes. The amount of work, I guess, is going to be the same as it would be when it was spread over 2 weeks, but it's going to be focused into 1 week. So at one level, everybody gets it over and done with in one fell swoop. At another level, they have to potentially double. It probably won't be double capacity, but they have to increase capacity. So it will make for one more frantic week, but with slightly longer at the end of it to enjoy the rest of the summer, which we all hope would involve going abroad on a nice summer holiday, but doesn't look like it's going to at the moment.
Well, let's see what happens with the so-called roadmap and the various lifting of the restrictions. But certainly, when I spoke to practitioners, people really at the centre of delivering these results, whether it's at the college level, whether it's at the awarding organisation level, we had a whole programme on that last week. I think, the overall view was that actually things been very well managed this year from a consultation point of view, from a planning point of view. Yes, it's different from last year, but there's also lots of learning from last summer in terms of how to communicate work between exam boards, awarding organisations and centres. For the centres themselves, I think they've also learnt a huge amount as well in terms of what works well with students, how you communicate with students. So, fingers crossed, I guess, Chief Regulator, in terms of, all the best laid plans and all that. But certainly, the consensus from last week was that, things are very much on track, and people are looking forward actually to getting on and implementing an effective process. Now, Simon, I know you're really interested in the use of technology in assessment. Indeed, I think you've written and said lots of things about this in the past. Do you feel that the pandemic has really exposed potentially the woeful inadequacy of some of our more paper-based systems?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's easy to knock paper-based systems, but they do have the great benefit that you can repurpose a school gym, put a few desks in and get an individual. Yeah. There's no capital that you need to expend. There's no network manager that you need to have hanging around in the wings and so on. So in order to move over to a technology-based approach, you need to be very satisfied that it's going to be money well spent and it's going to save you time and trouble and make things easier. I guess there are two dimensions to this. There's one with what I call the facilitative elements of a technology-based solution for assessment, and that's things like online invigilation, having people be able to take exams remotely, just making it easier and more accessible to take exams. And I think that's something that will come. Obviously, there's a whole argument that people are more fluent with keyboards now than they are handwriting. Though interesting, I myself took a level 7 diploma about 18 months ago, and I was reflecting as I sort of scribbled away in the exam hall and then had to sort of flick back and forward in my paper how difficult I would have found it personally to do that on screen. But nonetheless, I think that's the sort of general direction of travel. And then there's the possibility actually that you can assess people in a different way using technology, and that's about things like adaptive assessment. So instead of having 3-hour tests where everybody has to sort of go right through a whole range of questions to establish their level, actually you can get very quickly to the level at which people are capable of operating, have much shorter and therefore probably less stressful tests. But also you can have more authentic items. So you can have, as it were, virtual lab practicals in an exam context. Yeah. And those are all pretty attractive things to do, but they are significant challenges. They're technologically challenging. They require time. They require a lot of bedding done. And of course, they require good and robust systems at the other end of things. So I think things will go in that direction. But if somebody were to say, is that a 1 year, a 2 year, a 5 year, or a 10 year process, I'd say it's a sort of 5 to 10 year process to get to where that can really be useful and exciting and help transform assessment in a way that people at the end of it will perceive as being positive.
Yeah, well, indeed. I think your comments I read were well over 10 years ago, and you were talking then about 10 or 15 years away. So, it just goes to show, I guess, how, although technology follows ideas, sometimes those ideas, as you say, do take quite a while to implement. I mean, on the point then about technology in terms of areas like remote invigilation for regulated qualifications and endpoint assessments, and indeed areas like functional skills. I mean, if there's one thing, I guess, about the pandemic, it has put some fresh urgency, hasn't it, beneath the idea of the extent to which you can remotely assess candidates, not least if you've got, as we have still at the moment, a bit of a backlog in the system around functional skills. But when you use the word robustness, are we quite there yet to have potentially a blanket approach to functional skills assessments all being remote, or are we still always going to need this more mixed economy, remote invigilation where it works, where it's appropriate, and of course the more traditional methods as well?
We're in a peculiar situation that the pandemic has hastened the migration to remote and to doing assessment online for functional skills, but it's also obviously created some situations where it's been difficult for one reason or another for students or centres to access some of those online solutions. I think most of the awarding bodies offering functional skills tests have now migrated their testing capability online, and I think that's definitely the direction of travel, and certainly the policy at the moment is that students should expect to take a formal exam, and that it should be they should access the online opportunity where it's available.
Yeah, time's ticking on, but there's just sort of penultimate question I had to ask you really, which was about the role of innovation and regulation and where those two important areas intersect. And for Ofqual, looking ahead, obviously there's some big things going on, not just in terms of qualifications reform. Obviously we've got policy reform with the FE white paper. We're expecting a skills bill in the autumn. We've got legacy reforms, you might call them, because they date to pre-pandemic, around the idea of reforming level 3 and below vocational technical qualifications at level 2 and below as well. So there's no shortage, is there, of quite meaty issues for us all as a broader FE skills ecosystem, but also for the awarding bodies and for the regulator to get their teeth stuck into. What do you see the role then of innovation in all of that?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because as a regulator, I think you've got to make sure that the regulatory apparatus and your approach as a regulator is something that can support and encourage innovation. But you've also got to do it in the context of making sure that there's still a level playing field, and ultimately in a way that helps contribute to innovation, improving the system in its generality rather than just in the sort of particular area where, or with a particular awarding body where it's being applied. So I think innovation is pretty key. There's a very ambitious reform programme for vocational and technical qualifications. And given the sort of complex areas covered by those qualifications, the multiple standards, the complex employment environment in which they operate, clearly technology has got to be at the heart of doing that in an authentic way that supports a good, robust, well-respected vocational technical qualifications regime. So I would see innovation as being very, very key to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, I wanted just to end by briefly exploring, together a potential A-level question, on the future of assessment. There's a lot of public chatter, I think, out there, certainly amongst the the curriculum community about the future of assessment and whether we need to rethink it. But it was the American academic sort of pedagogy specialist Robert Stake who said, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the restaurant diners taste the soup, that's summative. So the A-level question would go something like this. The pandemic has taught us that formative assessment is no longer fit for purpose. The future is summative assessment. Discuss. What's your thoughts on that as an A-level question, Chief Regulator?
Well, I would probably sort of seek an easy refuge by saying I prefer it to be a multiple choice question.
Okay. That in itself is the future potentially of assessment. More multiple choice then.
But the other thing I guess I would say is I started in public exams in 2002, but before that I'd worked in the food industry. And when they said to me, why do you think you're qualified to come from the food industry into assessment at my job interview, I said, well, in the food industry, you could kill people by getting it wrong, whereas in the assessment business, you could just mess up their life chances. And I think that's the sort of thing one has to bear in mind. Assessment is an absolutely key thing. And the benefit of summative assessment is it's well respected. People still regard exams as a fair way of managing progression. And I think that's something very precious and something that we really need to have in mind whenever we're looking at changes and reforms to the exam system. So I'm afraid I'd probably sort of overrun the allotted space on the exam rubric, but I think that would be my sense of how to deal with that particular question.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
The song is IOU. from those 80s disco band members known as Freeze. Don't forget, if you want to listen to any of the great tunes we play on this show from the 80s, 90s and even the modern day, then just head over to our Spotify playlist and search Skills World Live. Now, today's hot topic is, are we facing an impending digital skills disaster? We asked the question as it comes on the back of a seminal report out recently from a trinity of organisations led by WorldSkills UK, the Learning and Work Institute and the Enginuity Group. The report found that 76% of businesses said that the lack of digital skills is having a real effect on their bottom line. Meanwhile, the number of students in FE taking ICT courses has really dropped off in recent years. Joining us to chew over the contents of the report is Stephen Evans, Chief Executive at the independent campaigning body, the Learning and Work Institute, and joining him, Emma Roberts, Head of Research and Public Affairs at WorldSkills UK. Hi to you both.
Hi, Tom.
Emma,
Hi, Tom.
Coming to you first, in a nutshell, what else should we take as the key highlights of the report?
Thanks, Tom. So, we're really delighted to be able to do this report with Learning and Work Institute and Enginuity, and really to get under the skin of digital skills supply and demand. And there's lots of encouraging news. So employers and young people both appreciate the importance of digital skills to the economy and to their future careers. But on the other hand, we did discover that there is a real disconnect there. So employers are expecting an increasing demand from their point of view on digital skills. So 60% of those that we polled are expecting an increase in digital skills for their workforce over the next 5 years. And we also noted in our young persons poll that actually quite a lot of young people aren't confident that they've got the advanced digital skills that employers are looking for. All at the same time, as you say, that actually the provision of education and training in digital skills decline.
Yeah, well, that's what really struck me about the report. It's almost like kind of triple whammy in the end, because you've got, as you say, on the one hand, young people, some young people anyway, lacking confidence in this area. We've got employers saying that the demand for digital skills has never been higher, and arguably now with the pandemic and the shift to Zoom land that's occurred over the last 12 months, that's only going to grow in the future. Meanwhile, you've got this finding in your report that there's been quite a significant drop-off in the number of students that are actually taking ICT courses in FE. I mean, coming to you, Stephen, do you think that's something we should be really concerned about?
Yes, I think as Emma says, it is great that employers and young people are recognising the importance of digital skills, but we do have that real drop-off in numbers taking courses to improve them. And I think we need to look at the content of courses as well. As we emerge from the pandemic, we're likely to be doing more working from home and more forms of digital engagement. So what does the content of those courses look like? But also, we highlighted in the report a real digital divide in many young people not having access to devices or good internet connection or whatever it happens to be. So we really need to take quite a rounded look at how we do better on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, another really stark finding, the numbers of young people that are in so-called sort of digital poverty, which is, very real from the point of view if you've been told via a lockdown to go home and just undertake all your courses via online learning, but you haven't got access to a decent broadband connection, a decent device. I know the government's put some measures in place to get devices out to young people, but do you think from a policy point of view, we've reached a position now as we emerge from this pandemic that actually these are just things as important almost as street lighting and roads? It's kind of infrastructure. Shouldn't we ensure that every young person has access to a good quality device and a stable broadband connection? What do you think, Emma?
I'm sure that's right. I know that other countries have already had that approach where it's considered just as important as those things.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to see, and that's what we're trying to drive forward through, our own programmes. We want to make it as accessible as possible, and we really want to increase young people's aspirations in this area as well.
Yeah.
the concerning things for us was to hear that young women in particular aren't as attracted to digital careers and aren't as confident about their own digital skills. So when we look at our career programmes, we really want to try and increase that appeal and make people excited about the opportunities that a digital skills career can offer them.
Yeah. Stephen, what's your perspective on that? I mean, you'll be aware, obviously, the government's putting money into these so-called, I think they're still called digital boot camps. I mean, is that enough of an intervention for the scale of the challenge that this report sets out?
I think I've often written about this country being somewhere where talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't.
Yeah.
And actually, these digital opportunities, and that includes working within the digital sector, but actually includes meaning that you don't have to come into an office all the time. That has the potential to really break down some of those barriers and give young people more opportunities than they had before. But to do that, we need to make a bit of a step change. So the digital boot camps, it's a good idea, but it's not enough. The laptops and other devices for young people, good idea. Issues with delivery, I know, but also what about apprentices? What about adults? What about young people not in full-time education? So I just think we need a much bigger ambition that reflects this changed world that we're in now.
Yeah, and on that ambition, I mean, you think about where we are with the idea of English and maths. You know, we make that compulsory, don't we, in the secondary, indeed in the whole curriculum, you know, from primary years upwards. We certainly make it a prerequisite that functional skills in English and maths needs to be attained if you're an apprentice, for example. So have we reached a point, do you think, where digital skills now needs to be absolutely embedded in every aspect of the school, upper secondary, and indeed adult skills curriculum? I mean, would you support that, Stephen?
Yes, I think digital skills are a core basic skill these days. And, the government's recognised that to an extent for adults by introducing an entitlement to digital learning alongside literacy and numeracy, though not with extra money to back that up. And I think that applies throughout. So there are lots of job opportunities that will come up in those digital sectors and using those digital skills. But it's also about changing the ways that we work and learn together as well. You know, we found earlier last year a real switch and engagement in lockdown learning and people learning online in lots of different ways, including how to use Zoom and things like that. So it's how do we harness that interest and how do we make sure it's evenly accessible to everybody?
Yeah. Emma, what I really liked about this report, actually, which is unlike probably a lot of reports in this space, is it's a sort of report that's not just going to sit on a shelf and gather dust. I like the fact that it's very action orientated, and indeed WorldSkills has got a key part to play in all of that, haven't you? I mean, you just want to say a bit more about what you're planning as an organisation then in this space?
Absolutely, yeah, and we're determined to do research that is action focused, as you say, because it needs to be able to inform the development of our programmes. And so I've already mentioned the fact that we're going to be using it to inform our careers advocacy work. So our Spotlight Talks, which took place in March and will take place again later this year, we're going to make sure that there's lots of digital content there, really inspiring young people to take up those advanced digital skills careers. But we're also looking at our competition programmes as well and how we really bring through the best digital skills talent through there. And like you say, thinking about digital skills as a core skill, we're looking at our competition programs across the board to see where digital skills are already a part of that, but we don't know about it, and to see in other areas where we can make sure that there is a basic digital skill as part of that. And also then through our international competition program, making sure that we're really aspiring to be among the best in the world. So in things like in Industry 4.0, in cybersecurity, and 3D game arts, we want to be even better than we have been in the last few international competitions. Yeah. And that feed through into the system as well if we can develop those real high quality skills. Yeah,
well, that's why it's such a big opportunity ultimately, isn't it? It's not all doom and gloom. I certainly hope it's not a digital skills disaster. I mean, obviously for people like Stephen and I, who arguably can't claim to be digital natives, we were born in the analog era. There certainly are at least people coming through now in the workforce who certainly could claim to be digital natives. Although even the analog amongst us have had to learn some new digital skills. So I really wanted to close off this segment, if I may, by just asking you, whether it's individually or organisationally, what's the one digital skill that you think you've picked up or learnt this year that's been really helpful for you, either individually or for your organisation? And I'll volunteer myself first by saying I think the whole launch of Skills World Live, being able to live stream, going on that journey for myself and with the rest of my small team at the Federation of Awarding Bodies, has just been one hell of a journey in terms of understanding how you can still get to audiences that otherwise you'd be prevented from talking to by utilising a whole array of digital skills. So that's my offering to you. Stephen, what's yours?
Well, I think that was a harsh but fair description of me there, Tom. But
no, I was applying it to myself as well. Yeah, please don't.
I think for me, I'll pick out two, if I may. One is about the way that we work. So as an organisation, we've been working at home for just over a year now, and I think we've learned lots of ways to keep in touch and to make that work in practice. And every now and again, I still leave myself on mute, but I think that applies to all of us.
I think it does, yeah.
But I think also how we engage with people. So we took our events program online, and we've had thousands and thousands of people dial in to our events, and learning how to do those and to engage people differently and engage more people and make them participatory, I think has been a real learning point for me and for us as an organisation too.
Great. What about you, Emma?
I think it's probably very similar. I mean, just being able to manage your working life through lots of Teams meetings has been the main learning curve. And actually, I'm going to be controversial here in saying knowing when not to be doing things digitally and not to be looking at a screen, I think, has become equally important.
Yeah, very, very good observation. Would you describe yourself as analog or digital native, Emma?
I think I'm in that strange era that's in between. So when I was at university, I hand wrote all of my essays.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's very old school.
Yeah. But I've had to pick it up quickly since then.
Okay. Well, let's not be harsh on either of us. Let's say we're all making that transition to being fully fledged digital passport holders. Emma Roberts, WorldSkills UK, and Stephen Evans. Great to get you back on the show, Stephen, from the Learning and Work Institute. Thanks for your time.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
OneFile is the best apprenticeship e-portfolio in the world. But did you know it's ideal for all kinds of vocational training, including traineeships? OneFile is very flexible, so it has everything you need to deliver, manage, and track traineeship progress.
We're currently using OneFile for all our traineeship learners. They love it, and so do we. It's fabulous. Thank you, OneFile.
To find out more about OneFile, head to onefile.co.uk and book a demo with a member of the team.
make myself believe it. This night will never go.
Welcome back to Skills World Live. We're going to continue now with today's hot topic on the subject of whether we're facing a digital skills disaster and what we can do about it. In this three-way discussion, I'm delighted to be joined by one of the sponsors of the report we discussed earlier, Lucy Thompson, who's also Chief Operating Officer at the Enginuity Group. And what a pleasure it is also to be joined by Dan McCabe, a WorldSkills UK competitor and gold medalist, no less. Perhaps he'll tell us a bit more about that. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for coming on. Lucy, let's start with you. Why is it important that workers develop advanced digital skills as well as being able to turn themselves off mute when they jump on a Zoom call?
I think it's fair to say, and what became clear through our research, is there's some confusion around what basic digital skills and what advanced digital skills are. Yeah. You know, in this last 12 months, the ability to use Zoom, Teams, video calling have been branded as digital skills. Actually, that's not the case. When you think about basic digital skills, they're the ability to use the software, the IT tech that you have in front of you to for what it's there to do. When you talk about advanced digital skills, it's about using data to drive decisions. It's about taking data and turning them into intelligence. It's about being able to code. It's about being able to use graphics, animation, and a whole plethora of other things. And when you think about the world that we live in today and the world in which employers work in and deliver their services, those things are a basic expectation of consumers. So therefore, employers have got to move with the times, and digital skills are becoming a premium. In fact, there was some research done in 2019 by Burning Glass, who looked at all of the job adverts that were out at the time, and it found that 2/3 of UK occupations actually required basic digital skills, with a huge shift forecast in advanced digital skills. So this has been an issue that's been around for a while now. Yeah, and I'm so glad actually that you kind of clarified for us that there is a difference between just being able to fire up your laptop and access Zoom or Teams from, as you say, coding, being able to use big data, because in a sense that's also came through in the report, didn't it, about why for some employers that lack of those advanced digital skills is actually holding back their profitability, isn't it, in some cases? Absolutely. And, you know, the digital skills reach beyond the tech sector. They're touching all jobs in all sectors. And, you know, the ability to have advanced digital skills at your fingertips as part of the way you deliver your services or manufacture your goods, for example, has been shown that, you know, advanced digital skills has a direct link to business growth, improved productivity, and really support innovation. So when you take those three things away and you haven't got advanced digital skills in your business, where does that leave you? Yeah, exactly. Well, I tell you what, if we, during the lockdown, given we're a national trade association, hadn't have invested in live streaming technology and, as you say, the software that goes with being able to get out to audiences remotely, I don't know where we would be as well. Dan, let's come on to you. Now, obviously, I see here in my notes that you are a gold medalist at one of the European skills competitions. Tell us more about the category in which you won that in.
Yeah, so my skill that I competed in was I guess an advanced digital skill. Is 3D game art, so it would fall under the umbrella of things like, you know, graphic design, animation, and those skills that are, you know, absolutely pivotal towards, you know, creating a brand, you know, for your business and growing that business in that kind of sector. And you see it all the time, people missing out those skills because they don't think they're relevant to them. Sure, game development might be a little bit niche, but as Lucy was saying, the big data and stuff like that, it doesn't matter where data is data. It's converting that to information and being able to use it productively to help you out. So important. And that's kind of what the competition was about, right? We in our skill, it's, you know, we're trying to take data and turn it into a video game. And, you know, that's something that I think all colleges should be doing. It doesn't matter what your sort of subject area is. Doing competitions and applying your course into those competitions are going to ultimately lead back into how you can, you know, use those digital skills. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about that some more because obviously if people are listening on the podcast audio, they're missing out here. They should definitely watch the
the show at skillsworldlive.com, because they'll see straight away that you're surrounded as a gamer by all the paraphernalia. And, you said there that all colleges should sort of take this area more seriously. Do you think, though, that one of the challenges you've got, if you are like yourself, you're into gaming and into a whole load of other advanced digital skills, that's clearly helped you along your way. Do you think, though, that potentially that whole area's got a bit of a, an image problem? It is sort of perceived, perhaps unfairly, as being about young sort of teenage boys in their bedrooms with all the gaming gear. Do you think that might hold back some people from getting into that sort of side of things?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest challenges facing our industry at the moment, and it's something that's being tackled by the Women in Games movement and things similar to that. There's plenty of things going on, and it is improving. I believe a recent study was done where they looked at the mobile sector and found out the biggest consumer of video games in the mobile sector was actually women by an absolute, landslide. And the mobile sector as a whole is absolutely gigantic, bigger than, console gaming.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
When you actually look at it as a whole industry, you probably find that it's way more balanced than it may first perceive, but it's trying to break the stigma that, these kind of shoot 'em up console games and playing apps on your phone, they're all games at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 young daughters at school, and they're never off their games. I perhaps I shouldn't mention Roblox on air, but let's just say I've spent far too much money on that particular app. Good for them. Lucy, I mean, does any of that chime accord with you? Particularly, so there's the challenge of how do we get more advanced digital skills embedded. There's the whole kind of digital poverty issue, and that came out, didn't it, very much in the report. And then there's this, kind of gender equality thing as well, isn't it? How do we ensure that the perceptions, images of what it means to be in this sort of part of the sector, how do you kind of frankly tackle some of those other outdated perceptions or just outright prejudices, really?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question in itself, isn't it? I mean, some of the research in the report has shown that young people are confident in basic digital skills and less confident in advanced. So without the confidence, that then leads to aspiration and willingness to learn. So how do we raise confidence levels at a really early age that says that, digital skills are a must and a must going forward, because the digitisation agenda across workforces is not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's only going to ramp up. And, participation in digital skills has declined steadily since 2015. So we're actually on a downward slope.
Which is just so surprising, isn't it? I mean, it's just so counterintuitive, that finding that you've had such a drop off. I think it was something like a 40% decrease in pupils taking the GCSE, computer IT and coding skills. Yet, it doesn't seem to be any lack of will on behalf of government, because there's things like these digital boot camps. There's obviously a lot of investment that's going into various parts of the education and skill system. Do you think, though, what we're missing is that kind of big push, this sort of idea that actually every young person should have access to a decent piece of IT equipment, a 4G dongle or 5G even now in some parts of the country, that, really we need to sort of think about digital skills like we do English and maths in the curriculum. It's absolutely core, isn't it? It's got to be central.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, in this day and age, and given what we've just lived through in the last 12 months, it's never been more prevalent, the lack of available digital technology for some sort of economic groups. When more than 10 families in disadvantaged areas have no access at all to internet, email, Roblox, like you mentioned, I cannot imagine a life like that. So it's really disheartening to hear that we're not making steps forward. Now, there's been loads of work done over the last 12 months, and we shouldn't, lose sight of that. The charities, the organisations who, the service providers who got behind those messages and tried to do their bit. But it's still not reaching the people that need it to be able to raise those aspirations. Yeah. We've got, and when you think about the education kind of framework, we've got T-levels due to be launched. And all T-levels, as well as having an industrial placement where young people can really work through and get an experience of the world of work, will have basic digital skills as a requirement alongside English and maths. But there's only 3 specific T-levels so far that are planned around digital skills. Right, yeah. So, we're chipping away, but this mountain is going to take a long time with a chisel and a hammer, so there really needs to be some kind of if you like, a different way of thinking to tackle this and to tackle this quickly, because the UK economy needs to recover, and we're not going to recover at the pace we need to if we don't tackle the digital skills gap.
So using that mountain metaphor, we're probably more at base camp at the moment, and we're still looking up at the summit. Look, a final word to you, Dan, and let's perhaps just finish off on a point there actually referred to by Lucy about placements and, access to the labour market. Do young people, people in your peer group, are they sort of aware of the different careers that are potentially available in advanced digital skills? I mean, you've already talked about how, when you look at the industry and who's involved in it, it's perhaps not as straightforward as many observers would think. But are we clear with young people in particular about the careers? And frankly, actually, not just young people, but, those maybe lost their job during the pandemic and those jobs are never coming back, but there's an opportunity potentially to retrain here and get into something completely different. I just wonder whether those signposts, Dan, are actually as clear as they need to be. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that is very close to my heart, actually, because I didn't intend to become a game developer. I was going to become a software developer. Right. And I stumbled into it because my interests are in games and graphic design and art. And ultimately, I stumbled into it.
Interesting.
The problem we've got with advanced digital skills at the highest level is to explain the differences between 3D game design, 3D game art, 3D animation, and VFX to someone who is just interested in how do I make a game is difficult to communicate. And that's something that needs communicating better, I think. And how can we stop this roadblock where we've got so many jobs that need filling, got thousands of different job titles, but we don't. If you don't have the advanced digital skill to understand the industry, you can't know which one of those jobs you want to do, if that makes sense, right? You've got even let's just take something super random like dentistry. There's I thought there was just one type of dentist, but there's tons of different types. You got hygienists, and then all these other ists that are specialised in different parts
and
of the
you got the ones into orthodontics, all of that. But as you say,
if I just thought, I want to work with teeth or something, or I want to be a dentist. Well, what do you want to be? A vet? Do you want to be a physio vet? Do you want to be a vet trainer? So you've got to understand the industry before you can direct yourself through it.
But at least arguably, those sorts of industries that you mentioned there, they've been around for decades, in some cases, hundreds of years. So there's probably more of a societal kind of cultural understanding at least, broadly, of those vocational technical areas. But, you're in an area that is literally probably didn't exist really 30, 40 years ago. I still remember playing, my ZX Spectrum 81 or whatever it was, just like Tetris. Very, very basic games development. But anyway, that's just me showing my age. But look, alas, that's all we got time for. But it's just absolutely brilliant to get you both on the show. Lucy Thompson at Enginuity, brilliant report. Thanks for sponsoring that. And Dan McCabe, WorldSkills UK Ambassador. Thanks for all your work too.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show with Tom Bewick.
You're listening to the Skills World Live radio show. Great music from the 80s, 90s and 2000s. Time now for the One File Tune of the Week.
All I know is that
Hope you enjoyed that One File tune of the week, Dead or Alive. You spin me right round, baby, right round like a record, baby. Oh yeah, brings back some memories, that one. Don't forget, all these tracks can be accessed over at our Spotify playlist. Just search for Skills World Live. And also, do make sure you head over to the One File Twitter account, where voting is taking place right now on what you want me to play next week. We've got some great episodes coming up. If you want to be on any of these shows, just email our digital producer ellie.hansen@skillsworldlive.com. And of course, today is St. George's Day, which incidentally is also the 1-year anniversary of this show going live. So happy anniversary, England. Happy birthday to Her Majesty the Queen this week. And big thanks as ever to all the guests that have appeared today, including the hard work of our wonderful production team. See you next week, everyone. Goodbye.
Remember to subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk or just download the show from any one of your favourite podcasting sites, including iTunes, Spotify and Spreaker. Your world, Skills World.